5 Americans who've been wrongfully detained in Iran for years might be on the brink of coming home.
The White House is facing fierce criticism for freeing up billions of dollars in oil funds in order to secure their release.
In 2023, the Biden administration struck a $6 billion hostage deal with Iran to release 5 American hostages, making it the largest hostage ransom payment in American history. But one man was excluded from this deal. Iran demanded an extra $2.5 billion in ransom for his release, or else he would be forced to stay in jail and sentenced to death. So, what was so different about this 65-year-old American and German dual national? His name is Jamshid Sharmahd. Jimmy was born in Iran, but fled after the 1979 revolution when the regime took control. But he never fled the fight. In 2003, while living in LA, he worked behind the scenes at Tandar.org, a news outlet for Iran's opposition movement. 4 years later, when the station's owner was disappeared, Jimmy took on a bigger role, helping run the LA-based TV and radio broadcasts as an uncredited contributor. But unfortunately, he didn't stay anonymous for long. A cyber attack exposed Jimmy's identity, turning him into a prime target of the regime, which labeled his movement a terrorist organization. And this started a relentless pursuit, pushing Jimmy to double down and become the voice of the movement through Radio Tandar. But speaking out comes with a price.
The Islamic regime may have paid an assassin to take him out.
This was an Iranian government plot to assassinate you. I mean, you're laughing. That seems pretty serious.
So I don't know what's weirder, seeing CNN actually doing their job back then, or the fact that this story has barely been touched by US mainstream media since. And there's a reason why you probably never heard about it, because this was all by design. And this is very important as we get into the video, because it will show you a glimpse into how deep and wide these hostage networks go behind the scenes.
You were the target of this assassination.
I am still alive.
But just a decade later, Jimmy's worst fear came to life. On August 1st of 2020, he was taken hostage in Dubai by Iran, where a ransom has been placed for $2.5 billion for his release. Why? Because hostage diplomacy is now a business. And it started all the way back in 1979, considering the Iranian Revolution literally began with hostages. 52 American diplomats and citizens were taken hostage for 444 days until the US unfroze $8 billion in Iranian assets. And now with networks extending from LA to Dubai, hostage taking is clearly a profitable enterprise. So how exactly does it work, and who benefits from it? And why haven't the US and German governments done anything to save Jimmy? So to find out, I met up with his daughter Gazelle, who spent the last 4 years fighting for his release, and her business partner Walid Perez, the former foreign advisor to Trump in Washington, D.C. So first, let's sit down with both Gazelle and Walid to learn more on their fight to get Jimmy back.
So I guess what was next after the foiled attempted assassination? What happened next?
The regime who wanted to assassinate my father never gave up, of course. They tried to lure him out of the country. They tried other assassination plots. They tried kidnapping plots. He couldn't leave the country. And in 2019, he said, I have to travel. I have to get new business contracts to keep our company. And they said, if you travel, something might happen to you. So he waited until 2020, and he said, I have to make a business trip to India, to Germany, to his business partners, and back. The flights during the pandemic, they were not direct flights. You had to take whatever you could get. So his flight was taking him from Frankfurt in Germany to Dubai, from there to Mumbai. He called my mom from Dubai, and my mom freaked out. She was like, what are you doing in the UAE? It's a little bit too close to the Middle East. And he said, no, I'm on a flight overlay. I'm waiting for my connection flight. He was in his hotel room. He even opened up his Google tracker, through Google Maps, how you can track your family members. He's like, yeah, you can see me. So she was relieved, and she knew he would take the next flight. After a day, when he didn't respond, she was starting to get really, really worried. And on the map, she was seeing that he's not moving in the direction of India. He's moving in the direction of Oman. And then over the border of Oman, into Oman, and then to the coast. At the coast, the tracker broke off. The very next day, on August 1st, we were woken up to a video.
Iran's Supreme Court has upheld a death sentence against a 68-year-old Iranian German.
I was in complete shock. I woke up, my husband woke me up and told me, He only had to say, they have your dad. And I knew who they were, you know? And I thought 99% he's dead right now. So I was pouring tears. My brother was there, my family was there, and we were like, okay, who do we call? What do we do? I started my Twitter account back then. I just got on Twitter and started blasting out my dad was just kidnapped. And then we started calling. We started calling everything.
And this was this immediate as you're telling
immediately.
it?
Immediately.
That's very unusual in the best of ways.
Yes.
Okay, you saw this get broadcasted. What was the immediate media reaction?
Nobody wanted to talk to us. Nobody wanted to hear about it. They just reported that my father was all of a sudden a terrorist ringleader and arrested in Iran. And later, of course, with the help of our lawyers and the UN got involved, we showed this is an international kidnapping. But the media would not retract their stories.
Because in something as high stakes as this, it's so important that we get the facts straight. And as you'll see later on, there's a reason you probably have never heard about this story on US mainstream media. And it's also exactly why I use my sponsor, Straight Arrow News. Straight Arrow News is a free app and website that highlights not only left and right-leaning opinions, but most importantly, gives me that unbiased view of stories from all sides. And with my mission of looking at the money and power, it's so important that I get the facts straight, especially on interesting stories like this one. And it's exactly why I use them for research on my videos and even my newsletter. And so if you download their free Straight Arrow News app, you're not gonna just support me, you're also supporting a group of journalists that are dedicated to finding truth. So go to san.com/gen or my link in description to download the free app to stay fully informed. Now, back to the video. So if you're like me and you heard $6 billion, look, I say this with all due respect. Yes, there's no price on human life, but $6 billion for 5 hostages, that's $1.2 billion per person. And look, I don't know if that's just me, but I don't know if I'm worth that much, bro. But obviously, it's not that simple. These payments aren't just rescuing individuals. Hostages become high-stakes bargaining chips for both political and economic leverage. Let me explain. Because think about it. When military escalation can cost way more than $6 billion, it actually ends up being the cheaper option for governments. But look, that's not me just being a bootlicker. Because if the US literally has a policy against negotiating with groups that they consider terrorists,
either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Why are they still making these sorts of deals? Well, because if you haven't noticed, these payments are never direct. But instead, it's an indirect route that they use that involves things like frozen asset releases, backdoor deals, and, as you'll see, third-party negotiations. And it's exactly these indirect deals that involves middlemen or exactly what allows these certain interests to profit from the hostage trade. And so before we turn to the conference, I wanted to dig further into this and learn from Walid, because how exactly does the system actually work? And more importantly, who are the ones profiting from this? Can you explain to me what exactly hostage diplomacy is?
There is a difference between kidnapping for a personal reason, for an ideological reason. But state diplomacy or hostage diplomacy is actually a regime. So you arrest them, you kidnap them, and then you keep them in prison in order to negotiate with the faction that these people represent or to get money. The reason we call it hostage diplomacy, it's because it's organized by a regime.
And who gets a cut from these hostage deals? Are there brokers? Are there negotiators? What is the specific intricacies around that?
There were negotiators, but more important than the negotiators are the brokers. You just proposed the term. Brokers are those sometimes visible, but most of the time invisible individuals. Brokers in these fields of kidnapping are not supposed to be there to make money, are supposed to help. But in the case of the relationship between the US and Iran, meaning the regime inside Iran, those brokers were part of the discussions, and most likely, we don't have that hard evidence, they have made money out of this.
And I'm guessing those negotiators or brokers want to stay anonymous for a reason.
Absolutely. Imagine if we reveal, or somebody would reveal, that those brokers have actually been in negotiations while those members of families were suffering, were being tortured. And if those brokers were part of a negotiation where one individual was not even negotiated for and others were, that would cause a lot of problems, humanitarian problems.
We often hear the phrase, don't negotiate with terrorists, but it seems like that's actively happening. In fact, if we're going to look at the context of Jamshid, right, that was in many ways what supporters were advocating for his release. How do we reconcile that kind of, I don't know if it's a cliche or a phrase, with what's happening?
He was kidnapped, as we know now, from Dubai. That's a very complicated, very tough situation. And the first question will have to go to the United States. That's the first question. I mean, you defend and protect all these countries. So how come your intelligence services, your agencies did not detect this? But the bigger question is, in the case of Jimmy, a number of US nationals were brought back because of the deal, but one was left outside. And that's the mother of all questions. How can that happen? And there are no answers.
Essentially, in order for those hostages to be released, the non-negotiable was letting Jimmy go.
That seems to be the case because nothing explains it otherwise.
And this is exactly what's turned hostage taking into such a profitable business model. Brokers and negotiators collect consulting fees or commissions, governments receive money, and behind every $6 billion deal, there are middlemen profiting from the exchange of human lives. But as I was finishing this video, an announcement was made. And it was on October 28th of 2024, when the last headline that Gazelle and her family ever wanted to see became reality.
Iran has executed a 69-year-old man with dual German-Iranian citizenship.
Of course, we share the sorrow of the family and his loved ones.
I just remember I woke up to like 50, 60 messages with people just saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that this happened. And like, I mean, when you wake up to that, it's like, why is everybody apologizing? Why is everybody so sorry?
Do you feel like you knew in the back of your mind?
There was, it's that feeling of like, why would anybody be so sad? So there was a feeling, right? And the thing that sucks is, since like the whole case was really big, like just like the other time, like I found it out before hearing it from my family directly.
Do you feel like guilty, the fact that you found out this way?
The biggest guilt I felt, and I still do, and I know like my family would say otherwise, it's from the initial moments where he got kidnapped, because I was the last person that he was in direct contact with, right? So there is a sense of responsibility.
Do you think he's actually dead right now?
It's hard to say, man. If I accept it, then at the same time, the drive goes away. I don't think there's been enough accountability for either one of the governments.
And that's the question, because could both governments have truly done more? And it's something I wanted to ask Gazelle directly, especially after Jimmy's announcement. And it's an uncomfortable thing to consider, but was Jimmy's story doomed from the start? And was he ever truly going to be saved? But look, it is important to consider because the real cost is the emotional one. It's why when I heard the news personally, all I could think back to was the conversation that we had at the conference just a month before.
What do you miss most about him?
It's hard. I miss everything about him. I miss, the security of having a father, the feeling of, I don't know what it is, but there is something between like daughter-father relationships where you have this bond that you think like nobody's ever gonna support you and love you as much as your dad, Okay, let's do this all over. I don't want none of this.
Okay.
No.
Only if you're comfortable with it. I think, if it's genuine, then.
So now the most important question becomes, what's next? Does the fight to bring back hostages end with Jimmy, or is there something more? What are you guys gonna do now?
Step number one is we want him back regardless. You can't just say someone died and it's like, all right, move on, guys. That happened. No. If he's alive, we want him back. If he's dead, we want him back and give him a proper burial. Second is accountability from everybody, from just severe negligence throughout. Because this is with tremendous amount of help from myself and especially my sister, who's been just essentially made him known internationally. So there is no reason to say, oh, we just didn't know. They knew directly from her.
And with that said, I now wanted to talk to Gazelle for the first time since the announcement. And we decided to talk especially on February 6th of 2025 because she just received some big updates about Jimmy that day. Could both governments have truly done more?
We scheduled this interview earlier in the week, but I think significant developments, especially today, has happened on Thursday of February 6th. What was announced today?
Today, I was informed that a casket apparently holding my father's body was brought to Berlin and then will later be brought to DC and then to us to California, but it just landed in Berlin. The German authorities and Americans are telling us they're pretty sure this is my father being brought back in a casket. So this is, in one way, the price of wrong diplomacy, of appeasement with this regime that has cost my father's life. And on the other hand, it shows our strength and our resilience in being able to get him back home. This is the beginning of justice. This is the beginning of holding the regime accountable.
When there's so much like kind of money to be made in this, do you really think that these lawsuits, these kind of reforms is actually going to happen? Or do you feel like it's just a shot in the dark that you have to take?
When we understand that this affects everybody, this is a matter of national security, then the public cares. When the public cares, they care about what is happening in the White House.
And so I think the big question that it keeps coming back to is, how do we stop these stories from continuing to happen? And as always, if you ask me, you have to look at the incentives. And it's something that even Jimmy predicted in 2011. Since the 1979 hostage crisis, this hostage business has continued to happen across many administrations. In 2009, under Obama, 3 American hikers accused of espionage were captured. The US denied paying a ransom of $500K per head, but again, these hostages became another instance of political leverage during a time when the US was sanctioning Iran over its nuclear program. And 6 years later, in 2015, under Obama again, the US paid $1.7 billion for the release of 4 Americans as part of these broader negotiations over the Iran nuclear deal.
We announced these payments many months ago. There wasn't a secret. We announced them.
And then, of course, the $6 billion under Biden in 2023. And so we always overestimate the power of the president and what he can or can't do. But one role where I feel like the president can actually do something is foreign policy. And so it remains to be seen moving forward what Trump will do in the next few years. But what's clear is that every time the US releases money or prisoners, incentivizes oppositions to take more hostages. There's no question about it. By refusing direct payments but engaging in indirect deals, the US may avoid the optics of paying ransoms, but the same players are still getting rich. And so that brings up the question, even though Jimmy's dead, could his story maybe lead to some change? And if you're wondering, how the hell have I never heard about this before? It's the exact same thing that I thought. There's a reason why since that CNN report it's been crickets. It's because it's not a story they want you to know. And it also shows you how much media has just become a mouthpiece to the narrative. So with that said, maybe some of you might think that what Jimmy did was completely irresponsible to his family and that maybe nothing will really change from his death. But if there's one thing that we can all learn from Jimmy is that true courage is an absence of fear, but more so doing it even if you're scared shitless. And it's exactly why I made this video, because we may not be able to change the system, but the more I can help you understand how money and power works, the better we can take back our own control and win in our own terms. Because we know damn well CNN isn't gonna do that anymore. So who else but Get? So this video is probably gonna get censored, so please share it if you enjoyed it. And remember, I'm perfectly healthy, so see you next time. I hope.